support man here in the background, Gökhan, will share this recording. So up next is Ulrika Hedlund, productivity advisor at Storyals. And she will talk about how to build a world-class team in Microsoft Teams in 10 steps. Ulrika, are you here?
I am.
So welcome to today's session. As already mentioned, it's a recorded session that Gökhan is playing now. And let me start. Oh, the recording is still running, Knut?
Yes, I did start the recording while you were speaking and introducing yourself. So
this is a great benefit if you have two moderators. Someone will definitely start the video. Thank you so much, Gökhan.
No worries. So I will share then the video of Ulrika, and Ulrika then can reply to the questions in live. So enjoy this session.
Hello, everyone. What a great honor it is to be speaking at this event filled with digital workplace enthusiasts. My name is Ulrika Hedlund. I'm the founder of Storyals. We help organizations all over the world transition to a modern digital workplace using Microsoft Teams and also many of the other amazing Office apps available in Microsoft 365. The name Storyals comes from a combination of story-based tutorials, and that's really at the core of what we do, storytelling. Why is it so important? Well, storytelling really is key in learning. If you think about it, when you watch a traditional PowerPoint presentation filled with facts and figures, the logical side of your brain kicks in. But when you tell a story, and especially if you add emotion to that story, our entire brain lights up, and it makes it easier for us to remember. Also, as human beings, we're wired to learn things. When we learn things, our body releases dopamine that makes us happy, and that dopamine also is used as a save button in your brain that helps you to remember. We all know that you need to learn new things in order to adopt the tools in your digital workplace. But even more important than that, you need to change the way you work, the way that you've always done things. And for that, you need to want to change. And that's key in change management. So at Storyals, we provide you with a solution to inspire, motivate, as well as educate your users through video-based storytelling. We provide organizations with a modern, evergreen learning solution filled with story-based learning, combined with many of the free how-to videos from Microsoft right from within their own digital workplace in Microsoft 365. In my session today, I will be providing you with 10 steps for how to build a world-class team in Microsoft Teams. I initially wanted to name the session How to Build a Kick-Ass Team in Microsoft Teams, but the organizers thought that world-class was more appropriate. Now, using Microsoft Teams to really support the way that you do your work and excel in performing, there are so many things that you need to discuss. I mean, this entails organizational behavior, leadership, communication skills, so much. But as always, I will focus on the most important things that you need to know. To help you even further, I will also write these steps down in a blog. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn because I often share a lot of information there. So to do that, just take up your phone, if you have one, and lift it up and open up the camera app and scan this QR code that you see on the screen. This QR code will open up my profile page and you can connect with me from there. Okay, before we dive into the 10 steps, let's have a look at where we are today. The past few months, Microsoft Teams usage has literally skyrocketed. It's a bit Ironic, I must say, for those of us who have worked on driving adoption for years, that it would take a global pandemic to get people to use these tools. However, with that said, though, it's really important now that organizations make the most out of this spike in adoption, and that we, get to a new type of normal where we find a great combination of meeting in real life in person and also meeting and working digitally. For many organizations, the spike in usage of Microsoft Teams has predominantly been for the use of chat and online meetings. And don't get me wrong, that's great to be able to use that basic functionality. The user interface is quite similar to what we had before. So if you were used to using something like Skype for Business, the transition isn't that big. The big change, however, is when you start working in teams and channels and you start communicating via those channels instead of sending emails or sharing documents through attachments with each other. This is where the big change comes. And this is also where organizations really need to think through how they architect their teams and how they educate their users on how to effectively use these new tools. Because think about it, you're really taking away the tools that people are so used to working with, and you're providing them with entirely new tools. It's like giving them an entirely new business language to speak. One of the most important things, if you're going to transition from using email internally to fully collaborating within Microsoft Teams, is for everyone to understand why. What are the benefits of using Microsoft Teams? Here, I recommend that you read through my blog called The Pros and Cons of Microsoft Teams. Here, you'll get a better understanding of the many benefits, but also some of the downsides with Microsoft Teams. I also recommend that you read my blog on how to succeed with Microsoft Teams. That will give you some additional ammunition for the battle ahead. For those of you who have access to the Storyals learning solution, or even if you just follow our blogs, you know that we use an analogy of a house to explain Microsoft Teams. So you can think of a team as a house and your different channels as rooms within that house. We're going to continue with this analogy through this entire session. So here goes. Let's start with step number 1. Decide what type of house to build. A team can either be an org-wide team for everyone in your organization, so-called org-wide team, or for a subset of people in your organization. Understandably, org-wide teams require a lot of planning and involvement by your IT administrators, so we'll leave that out for today's session. So if you're not creating an org-wide team, that leaves a normal team. That could either be a departmental team reflecting your org structure, like a marketing team, a sales team, or so on. Or it can be a project-based team that's set up with different people across departments, as well as external people that work on various engagements. Depending on the size of your organization, you might already have guidelines in place. For instance, what to call a team or what the security settings are. But if you don't, there are certain things that you should think about. For instance, if it's a departmental team, what should it be called so that the various departments follow the same naming convention? You also need to decide if it should be an open house or if you need to have a door to restrict who's let in. In Microsoft Teams, this would relate to a team either being private or public. A public house is visible to everyone in the organization, and anyone who wants can join. A private team, on the other hand, requires that you have someone that lets you in. A word of caution here. It might be very easy to say that, hey, we have a very open policy and a very open culture within our organization. Let's make all of our teams public so that everyone can see what's going on. Sounds great in theory, but in practice, it can be a bit tricky. The reason for that is when you share files within a team, everyone by default has access to those files. Not only read access, but also editing access. So you want to make sure that everyone doesn't access those documents and by mistake start to edit them. It might be better to set up a structure where you have private teams and you invite people from different departments to collaborate with one another, even if they're not actively working in that team. Step number 2, use your old furniture or get new. If you're a startup or if you're just starting to use Microsoft 365, you have the luxury of starting from scratch. But for many organizations, this is not the case. Just like when you're moving into a new apartment, you either bring your old furniture or you have the luxury of starting fresh and buying all new furniture. For organizations and teams, it's pretty much the same thing. Many already have a long history of things that they've worked on, files and document libraries. So you need to look at, are you going to bring those with you or are you going to start everything from scratch? When you create a team in Microsoft Teams, you can link that to an existing Office 365 group and thereby keep using the existing SharePoint library that you're using. A word of caution though is that the structure within Teams is a little bit different. In Teams, files get organized per channel. So each channel get their own folder in the folder structure. And this might be something that you're not fully familiar with. Even if you have an existing Office 365 group with OneNote and with your documents, it might be worth looking into if you want to start a team from scratch and then just move some of those things over instead of just creating the team directly to the existing Office 365 group. There's no right or wrong here. You just have to look at your specific case. Step number 3. Design rooms suitable for your work. Now you have your house. And if you haven't built it using a module house, which in Teams corresponds to using a Teams template with predefined channels and tabs, all you have is the general channel. Now, you need to start thinking about what channels or what rooms you need to have to support your work. This really is a joint effort with everyone in your team. If you're a very small team, then perhaps just using the general channel is a good start. But if you're a larger team and if you have different work streams that you work on, you might want to start out with having different channels for those different work-related streams. Again, think about it as a physical office where you have different rooms where you work on different things. Here is an example of a marketing department team. Here we have a channel for social media, events, websites, newsletters, team fun, and random ideas and questions. It's important when you create your different rooms that you think about if they should be used for ongoing work or if they should just be used once for specific engagement. For example, do you want to set up a dedicated channel for planning the annual summer event that you after the event never use again? Or do you want to have a channel for all events you execute throughout the year? If the same people are working on the events, and if there's not too much overlap so that there might be confusion between the events, it might be better to just keep it in one channel. If, however, you have different people working on different events at the same point in time, separate channels might be the preferred way just to manage the work more easily. Step number 4, dedicate some private rooms. By default, everyone in your house can access all rooms and see what's going on. In general, this is great for increasing knowledge sharing and communication. But sometimes you might need to discuss things in private. In addition to the most obvious things that you would create a dedicated private room or private channel for, like management, it might also be useful to create channels for one-to-one communication. Let me tell you why. There are 2 ways to send text messages in Microsoft Teams. Either you can post a message in a conversation and @mention someone, or you can send a chat message. A chat message pops up on the receiver screen and is best suited for things that need a response right away. But if your message isn't time sensitive, a one-to-one channel might be more suitable. Here, you have a place where you can discuss things that aren't necessarily right now. The benefit of having it in a channel is also that you can see it in your activity feed, just like your other conversations. Step number 5, create a floor plan. Before you invite people into your house, create a house overview with a floor plan. The floor plan of your house corresponds to an overview tab in Teams. In the General tab, I recommend adding a tab called About this Team. And for each channel, an About this Channel tab. If you're using the out-of-the-box Teams template, each channel comes with a wiki that you can use for this. I'm not particularly fond of wikis because they're not that user-friendly. You can't easily copy and paste images into them. But they look good and they load quickly. Write who and what the team is for. Where do you go to do what? Make sure that your channel owners properly describe what work is carried out in that channel and what guidelines should be followed. What information goes where? Are the conversations totally random or do they follow some structure? In our various teams, we've defined something we called structured channels. In these channels, we follow a certain structure where every thread is related to a specific item. In our media production team, a thread is related to a specific video in our library, and we keep all of the conversations related to that video in that thread. Step number 6, pin things of importance to the walls. So now you've built your house, you've created your different rooms where you will do your work. Now it's time to make these rooms cozy and functional. Pin things up on the walls that your team needs to deliver. In Microsoft Teams, these things that you pin on the walls correspond to tabs. So add tabs like your strategy or your goals or how you're progressing towards those goals. Put up frequently used files and other questions that people might need to get answers to often. These tabs aren't just limited to showing documents. Something I can warmly recommend here is to use Planner. Planner is like a bulletin board of tasks that you can easily move around. You can assign tasks to different people, and then you can see a visual representation of the status of those different tasks. Here you can also pin third-party applications. Perhaps your sales team is using a CRM system that they need to access through here, or your support team needs to access incidents or service request reports. So look through the many available apps and add them to the walls of your room. Step number 7, organize your stuff and accept that it will get messy. Each channel within the team will get their own Files tab, where files are stored in a folder in the SharePoint document library that belongs to the whole team. Again, this might not be the way that your team is used to organizing their files, but this is the way that the team's structure is built up. The beauty is that whether people know it or not, they're actually storing their documents in the cloud in a SharePoint document library, which enables co-authoring and the ability to access your documents from anywhere. One of the downsides with this setup is that as soon as someone attaches a file to a post in the channels, the file gets added to the root of the document library. You don't have the choice of where to place that document. So if you really need to have a structured approach for your documents, what I recommend that you can do is that you can set up a separate SharePoint library that you then attach as a tab into your team. Here you can have different sharing permissions, you can put metadata and other things to make sure that you have a good document management system in place. The good thing also is that you can do this not only in your own team, but you could add that document library then to other teams. In our company, we have an official image library set up with our latest thumbnail images that is separate from the production team, since that one gets pretty messy. Step number 8, facilitate communication with tags. If you have a small house, you can easily call people by name. But if you have a pretty large house, this becomes pretty cumbersome. In Teams, this corresponds to mentioning people. So what you can do is that you can use tags. So think of this as putting name tags or labels on your different people. And then instead of having to calling out their individual names, you can just call the group. Using tags really simplifies communication. One downside is that currently the management of these tags are a manual process. Step number 9, make your house smart. Now that you're moving into this new house, think of the endless possibilities that you can enable. In a physical house, this would be automatic lighting, or you can clap your hands and the lights go off, integrated sound systems, be really, really creative. Same thing for your team. There are so many apps and connectors that you can use to really automate and work smarter using these tools. Don't make the mistake of copying manual processes into Teams. Look at new ways of how you can automate things. Let me just show you some of the examples of apps that we use in our organization. Here is an example of how we provide our Storyals learning content right from within Teams, leveraging the Teams app LMS 365. And they can click to play the learnings right from within Teams. Here, they can also explore other types of learnings that they have access to. Another example of what you can do within Teams is to leverage bots. So here we have Stella, our productivity bot. She can help you and guide you to learnings that we have available for our employees. So for instance, I can ask, what is weight? And Stella provides me with a quick overview and a path to learn more. I might want to ask something more specific. For instance, if I'm stuck in my Excel spreadsheet and I want to know how to do a VLOOKUP formula, I always forget. I can ask Stella, Stella, how does VLOOKUP work? Stella then directs me to one of the how-to videos that Microsoft provide as part of Microsoft 365 Learning Pathways that we have integrated into our SharePoint Online Intranet site. These are just some examples of how you can use smart tools within Teams to really do your work smarter. If you can't find the app that suits your business needs, then your organization can create one for you using Power Apps and Power Automate. These are really powerful tools that enable you to build quick and easy to use apps that your users can access right from within Microsoft Teams. So make sure that you build a smart house for a new type of working. Now for the final step. Step number 10, ask for a gate pass. Now that you've created this beautiful house, that you've decorated and you created your various rooms, that it's really, really cozy. You don't want new joiners to run in with dirty shoes and yell and scream and disturb everyone that's actually there to do their work. So what you need to do, you need to ask for a gate pass in Teams that corresponds to people actually learning how to use app mentions to communicate, how to structure work in different channels. Within Storyals, we have 2 certificates that people have to get before they're let into our houses. One is Connect and Communicate using Teams. Here, you will learn how to use app mentions, how to use chat, how to use your presence, and how to have online meetings. The second certificate is Enhanced Teamwork. Here you learn how a team is structured with the various channels. Again, using the analogy of a house that people really get. So once they've gotten these certificates, we'll let them into the house. The other thing that is really important, in addition to learning how it works, is to set some ground rules. We call them our house Teams rules. Commit to not using email for internal communication, but to really use Teams. How are you going to communicate and be engaged with one another? What do you mean with the different expressions? One of the most important things when we look at the digital workplace is that we need to simplify things by making things smarter, but we also need to simplify things by reducing many of the options that we have. Now, when you're starting to use Teams, we won't take away the other tools. You will still have Outlook because you need to communicate with the outside world. You will still have SharePoint because you have all of that wealth in your intranet. But still, it's very important for defined projects or for defined departmental activities that people really can trust that the information they need is available there in their team. That brings us to the end of the 10 steps and the end of this session. If Microsoft Teams is new to you, then a lot of this might feel quite overwhelming. All I can say is that once you get used to this new way of working, you will never want to go back to using email and attached files anymore. The transparency, the knowledge sharing, and also the fun way of working will be a huge benefit that you will not want to be without. With that said though, no one moves into their dream house day one. It takes time. So start creating your first team, follow some of the guidance that I have given you, and I can promise you that soon you will have that world-class team. Thank you for watching. Bye. Bye and hi from semi-live to live. So we had an interesting discussion behind the scenes of live events and using Teams meetings. So for all of you who are, attendees, you realize that you can't ask questions via the chat. But now we're all here, so you can use the digital raise your hand feature or just unmute yourself if you have any questions.
Yes, we just realized that in the background that this is happening. So with my post to engage everybody, yeah, start to ask questions here. We will answer later. Yeah, but now you have the chance to speak up. So turn on your camera, unmute yourself, and let's go. We have full 30 minutes for a Q&A.
We can also deep dive into any of the steps.
But that was really a interesting transition from semi-live to live because you have the same background.
Yeah, it's quite funny when you do these different events. Some are, fully live, like you had in the session before with Tracy, and some, you do some of it recorded. And I know that Microsoft had a session before where everyone thought that everything was live, and then, the woman was like, "Okay, no, we need to cut that part out," and everyone's like, "Doesn't she know that this is live?" Anyway, I think this is also a great, use case of how we are using Microsoft Teams and Microsoft Teams for events. So I don't know if a lot of you that are on this session, if you attended the morning keynotes with Karin, who is another Swedish woman who used to work at Microsoft. So those events were done using Teams live events. And so then it's a little bit different structure, right? So when you have a Teams live event, you have a producer, you have the presenters, and then the chat that you have doesn't go directly into the, to everyone. It kind of goes into a place where you can filter out, and you see all the questions come in, and then you can filter and choose which posts to publish. But the way that this has been set up then is that the presenters can see the chats, but the attendees that are joining outside the tenant does not have that ability with the chat. But again, since we are here live, please, if you have any questions, but otherwise, we'll have discussions with the other, MVPs. Because something that I often meet when we work with organizations is that everyone in IT, love Teams, and they have no problem adopting it. But then when it comes to really, getting the leadership team, getting, more of the, the management, it might be a little bit harder. Not everyone is as, forthcoming as Karin that wants to have that open communication. So Gökhan, what have you felt in your engagements in terms of really, changing the culture and to get organizations on board?
Well, what I see is that actually it's not about the technology, but rather about the culture of the company, and you can have the best teams experience, and as you mentioned, have the 10 steps perfectly done in getting into your new house from day one. But it's actually what I see is that you have to break the silos from people. It's the blocking factor in organizations is not that the technology is the blocking factor, but that the human being accepting new technology, accepting the new experiences, like old people always hitting on the same button on the same time frame every day. Now suddenly changing the button from left to right is a huge deal.
Yeah.
And what I know is you have to deal with people. It's 90% to deal with people. Technology is the easiest part. Installing Teams, using Teams is the easiest part. The hardest part is to get actually that mantra of people up to date and accepting new technologies. That's the hardest part.
Yeah. We have Maria, we have a question.
Yes, we do. Maria, just unmute yourself, turn on the camera, and go ahead.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm from RMFCT in Abu Dhabi. Actually, we have some experience in Teams. Whenever we are adding some attendees during the class, it's like it's having some problem in getting them into the class, and sometimes locked. Sometimes they're not able to use the links that were shared to them.
Maria, sorry, I could not hear you very clearly. Would you mind repeating your question, or if it was just a comment?
And actually, we are having some experience with Teams. Whenever we are having like a class, we share the links or invite them through the Teams directly. but the attendees are not able to. They're not able to enter the class or the room when using the Teams. Even inviting them on the left side or right side, it's getting like it's difficult to invite a person to join the ongoing or upcoming class.
Okay, and when you say class, you mean like a Teams meeting, like the one that we're in now, but like
Yes.
yeah, not a channels meeting. Yeah. So you said you were in Abu Dhabi.
Yes.
Yes. So, I mean, I would say a big, benefit of using Microsoft Teams compared to before with Skype for Business is really the regulations and, with the telecommunications authority that did not allow voice over IP. So before there were huge issues with Skype for Business. But really, with the transition to Microsoft Teams, at least for us, it is a huge difference, and we can really work in this digital way. And I know this. I'm located right next to you in the neighboring Emirate. But if you have challenges of having a meeting like this, then again, I would absolutely, connect with your IT infrastructure partner. So if depending on the size of your company, you would have a fast track Microsoft partner that you could work with to make sure that you have the infrastructure set up properly. So there shouldn't be any issues with Etisalat or with Do, being based in Abu Dhabi and doing Microsoft Teams events or meetings.
Okay, thank you for that. And one more thing, we're regarding the chatting part, we're still like normally we are still more comfortable using the WhatsApp chat. But how can we transition to using the Teams? Like,
So Maria, I couldn't quite hear you, but I mean, let's have a chat online. So please connect with me afterwards, and we can set up a meeting, and we can look at how you can adopt and start using Microsoft Teams in a more effective way.
okay.
Yeah, great. Any other questions? Let's see if someone.
There must be more questions. I mean, guys, this is the ultimate chance here. You have two teams rock stars, and this is the perfect moment to ask all the super crazy complex questions.
So why don't I share that as well? So the discussion that I had with Maria, because this is not known to a lot of people. So Maria was based in Abu Dhabi, and I'm based in Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. And in this part of the world, voice over IP is not allowed from a consumer perspective. And so there have been, real challenges for a very long time being able to use these digital tools like Skype for Business and other solutions. But that's what I told Maria is a great benefit is now when you really able to use Microsoft Teams. Another challenge around the world for a lot of organizations is really moving to the cloud. Again, I'm Swedish, and in Sweden, in Europe and in the US, there's no issue that everything is moving to the cloud. But for a lot of organizations, this becomes an issue. So here Microsoft built a data center, and that helps. But there are a lot of questions when you look at transitioning to the cloud to see where is the data stored. Now, please, since we are live and we have the ability to ask questions, please raise your hand. But otherwise, I'll take this opportunity to speak a little bit more about also what Tracy shared in the session before around driving adoption. So, I think that there's so much information and there's so much training and videos. I mean, there's definitely not a lack of resources. I think the challenge that we see many times is in regards to ownership. Who owns driving adoption and driving digital leadership within an organization? Is it IT? Is it HR? Is it the leadership team with the CEO? And, my response to that is always that, it should be at the very, very top level. If there's something that's going to be important, not only in COVID times, but really in, moving forward in the future, is to have those digital muscles. But just like we said before, the technology itself is only a very, very small part of it. It is really, changing behavior and starting to work in new ways. And again, just as you saw in these 10 steps, I compare everything to, a metaphor, new furniture, old furniture, moving into, think of teams as a building with different channels. I think it's so, useful for people to have things that they understand and that they can relate to when they need to start kind of, constructing the way that they work. And another thing that we often find is that when we go to organizations and we ask them about, adopting Teams, they say, yeah, no problem. We don't need help. It's Teams usage has gone like this. But what we see is that, yes, it's chat or it's, meetings like this. But if you're really going to look at, moving your work from email that you do into digital teams, that really is a very, very big transition. And I think this is something that, a lot of organizations haven't really understood the big impact, or they're kind of ignoring it, or they're saying that we're not going to go in that direction. Another area that becomes a bit of a challenge is, especially as teams grows, like we said, now you can be 10,000 people in a team. That's not really a team. I mean, that's a whole organization, right? So where do you draw the line of what's being published on the intranet? And do you have an intranet if you're a small company? What gets published in the org-wide team? And then also if you're using Yammer, or maybe you're using another kind of social networking solution, what goes there? So I think it's extremely important that we help users simplify really, when to use what, depending on, what type of communication that you're going to have internally. I'll keep talking if no one has questions.
You're doing great. It's super interesting. And at some point there will be a question. I'm sure about that.
Okay, but then since I have other, experts here, where do you see in terms of organizations, and I mean, Valo, I know you're like the, heroes of the intranet. So do you see, where do you kind of see a lot of the benefits of adding like an org-wide team to your intranet?
So maybe I'll start as the Valo advocate at Valo. The org-wide team is actually a great way, and I'm pretty sure Microsoft will be absolutely against me because I'm saying that. But the story that they had like 2 years ago with the inner loop and the outer loop, like inner loop for Teams and outer loop for Yammer, I think partially the org-wide team can replace the outer loop part. If you're a small organization for 100 people, 150, like less than 1K, adding your partners, having a communication can perfectly done with the org-wide team. You don't necessarily need a Yammer organization, Yammer company profile page to do communication outside of your network tenancy. The org-wide team is great.
Interrupt you there, Gokin. Can I interrupt?
Yeah.
You said that you would use that as your outer loop. And even like now, you've invited me to join your tenant. I don't know about you, but for me, it is super frustrating having to change tenants for a few things that is not, I need to leave my tenant. Like leaving my tenant is like leaving my office. And I'm so included in everything that I do. So I don't want to leave my tenant. So then I open up multiple, other web browsers. And then some of them have multi-factor authentication, and I'm have to log in and log out. And I honestly, from a productivity
so then I have a good news for you.
Okay, yeah.
Microsoft will soon come with the option Yeah, Microsoft will come soon with an option to have all your tenants available, all your channels available from one screen without logging in, logging off, doing MFA, etc., etc. That's not for now, but I know they're working
I'll wait
very
until
hard.
then.
So that's coming soon. And yeah, the second thing with the org-wide team is that it's fantastic for doing announcements, global announcements. Like with Valo, we have like 3 regions: APAC, North America, and Europe. Take the example that tomorrow Michael becomes the new financial officer or the chief executive officer, then that announcement is not only scoped for Europe, but for the whole organization. Then that announcement could just simply go there for everyone. It has some implications, such as you can tag everyone, you can chat with everyone, you can make fun of the CEO in org-wide team. However, I think it's the
Might not have
best
a job tomorrow.
I think it's the best place to store or share the information, which is like company wide. And I think we have a question again from Maria Teresa. Hi, Maria.
Hi. Hi. Again. I have a question regarding the feature of Teams. We are using Teams as one of the platform in regards to integration, online training, and now we would like to uh, for one, we would like to proper and examine regarding to the for this one. Can we have the individual recordings of each participant?
Sorry, it's breaking up a little bit, Maria. I'm losing some words.
Sorry. This is regarding our online trainings. We're using Teams for the online trainings. Now we would like to prepare an exam, online exam. Now we would like to see. I would like to ask if there's a possibility of having a recording of each participants who's doing the examination on the same time.
Okay, so you're asking if there's a way to do reporting on examination on the ones that are attending.
No, video recording.
Sorry?
Video recording.
Video recording.
Yes. Yes.
Video recording of the training, you mean, of the meeting?
Of the exam of each participants, like altogether they are in separate or separate locations. Now we would like to have each candidates to have like separate recording of their examination.
Oh, like the
okay,
like
I
an
think
exam
that's the
after.
question. Yeah.
Okay, over to you then.
Okay, so basically you can't do that today. Teams is not meant to film everybody individually and how they do their exam. If they don't share the screen and if they don't record it manually, you can't do that. Teams is not meant to take exams and record what they have been doing on screen. However, you could potentially do that with a Power App and with Flow and, just build your own house and integrate that with Teams. However, today there is no out-of-the-box capabilities which can do that for you, unfortunately. Does that reply to the question?
Sorry. Okay. Thank you very much for the answer.
I think, it's. I've also been asked a lot of questions for Teams in terms of being, an educator and especially in the schools, and so many, that have children that are home from school and through online learning. So a few of the things that, are, that have been announced that we're looking forward to is that now with Teams, you can have 3x3 videos showing. Which is, really nice compared to what we had before when we only had, 4. Again, if you're in a class as a teacher and you have 25 kids, then that doesn't help. So that's also something that's been announced, that Microsoft will support 7x7, so 49, I guess, 49 individual video streams. in a Teams meeting. And this is something that at least, for when you see children online and seeing each other, it's really important, with the camera, and that they are seen and that they can see that themselves. So this is something that otherwise, Zoom has been used instead, where you can have more. And the other is, with a breakout room. So that's also something that Microsoft is working on. They've had a lot to do lately after, or with COVID. So they're working hard on getting that in place. That's something we'll have.
Okay, then we have a last
Yep.
question about Jason. Yeah, I'm sorry for the last name, but Jason, floor is yours.
Hi, Jason.
Hi, thanks a lot for this presentation. It was perfect. So I often get a question about private and public channels, and especially once it's been created. So how, for example, to move a private channel to public or vice versa? Do you have any tips or tricks to handle this once it's done, or?
So, Jason, you bring up a great question, because currently the whole kind of structure in Teams is not very flexible. So if you create a private channel, you cannot make that into public, and vice versa. If you create a private channel and you decide that, instead of having a private channel for our leadership team, we actually want to have a team for them. So let's kind of convert this into another team. So you don't have very good out of the box, in Teams. I'm sure that there are other partners that have built, solutions around this. But the way that it is now, as an end user, you can't just move or transition channels. So something that I say is that, really think through, the structure. So again, if you use the house analogy, think about your house and your different rooms. And if you want to create a private channel, it's great for certain scenarios. Like I said, you have one team with, the sales team, and you want to have one channel that is, private. Or even if you want to have just a one-to-one conversation and you don't want to open that up to others. But there are also then limitations in that private channel. So, for instance, you cannot add Planner as a tab. Another one that I've run into is that you cannot schedule channel meetings in a private channel. And channel meetings are great, right? For something like this, or when you have an ongoing meeting in your channel, you cannot do that currently in a private channel. So I would really like my advice, unless someone else here can pop in and correct me if I'm wrong. But what I think is really important then is that when you think about your structure, think about your different channels. And if you think that this private might grow to something more where you need more space, right? Think about it. You're going to need your own house with your own rooms. Then it might be better to think about that right away as a new team. But otherwise, it's good that you don't have to create so many teams, that you can just leverage those private channels. Something else that I often kind of want is, you have a private channel. So everything else in the team is open and you have a private channel. But again, if you think of it as the house analogy, sometimes I want a guest room. So think about it. You have a team, say that you have your leadership team, and then you have one initiative where you want to invite a consultant. You would just want that consultant to be part of that, that single channel. But currently you cannot do that, because if they're invited into the team, they by default get access to all of the open channels. So there are things that you really need to, look at pros and cons for different ways of kind of architecting your house in Teams.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
So as I told you, the questions will come.
I just keep talking. But we had someone else there. No, that was Michael, maybe. Yeah.
No, at the moment, no other hand was raised, but we have 5 minutes left. So is there anybody else with a question?
Maybe from the presenters or the other audience.
Yeah, another person just turned on the camera a minute ago, but left again.
That was our next presenter, Janus. So
yeah, he did the same thing as I did. We accidentally like, hi.
Yeah, I just saw it in the little icon down there. But great, then we already know that the next presenter is here, which is also good information.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so let me do this then. Let me bring up again the in case. Let me share my screen here and bring up my LinkedIn QR code. Is it showing?
Yes.
Yes. So I know at least Maria, I said that I would connect with you afterwards to see if you had any additional questions. Please connect with me here and for the rest of you as well. And like I said, I was up until 2 a.m. this morning putting together this session, but I will also write it down in a blog that will be available on our site. And so if you want to kind of read through the steps there as well. But if there are no other questions, then I will just say thank you very much and give you a 4-minute break before the next session starts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have to thank you for this brilliant session. That was really good. And it's great that we had so much time afterwards for a discussion. And we had also Gökhan here as well as a Teams rockstar and discussing these different scenarios. Yes, so it's good to have a few minutes left. Then I would like to hand over to my colleague Knut and the next speaker. And yeah, there are still a few minutes left for a quick coffee break. So Knut, all is yours. I will stop the recording here.
thank you, Michael.